I I have two readings this morning. One is a little on the long side. One is a little on the short side. This service, uh, the big picture context of this service is to deal at a rather spiritual depth with the phenomenon of getting ready to vote. Uh, in case you haven't noticed, there's an election coming up. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm trying to make a spiritual statement. I wrote a poem some years ago about the dynamic of voting. It's called On Voting. The no-show, the expressed no, the abstention, and the affirming yes. The tiny oxygen atom keeps its electrons neatly organized in distinct shells. Some orbit in one shell, some in the next. None revolve between the shells. Throughout the universe, from the wee small subatomic particles to the homogeneous galaxies, entities jump from one stable state to another, manifesting a quantum reality. Solar fires burn for eons after eon, turning hydrogen into helium endlessly. Then comes the moment when the pressure builds up and the star erupts into a supernova. Throughout the universe, for creatures and stars, when transformation occurs, there is no going back. The exploded star can't be reassembled. We live in a time developmental reality. Even in highly participatory organizations in which each member possesses a deep self-conscious resolve, they cannot escape these propensities for quantum stability in a time developmental context. After delegated deliberation, enlivened debate, a decision must be made. When the options are evaluated and enumerated, an irreversible decision point arrives. At the moment of the vote, four distinct options face each member of the group or organization. Some members of the group simply don't show up to vote. Some declare an adamant no, and others choose to express no opinion on a particular matter. Still others vote yes in efforts to move the organization into creative new directions. Those who don't show up or can find no way to participate in the decision finalization process relinquish their influence on the group's destiny and diminish its potential options. The unmanifested future requires a modicum of focused energy in order to emerge, and each element of the verdant present can choose where to invest the energy it focuses. The no-shows at the decisional moment indicate their blatant disinterest in the group's choices or acknowledge their inability to unite their passions with the group's present journey. After the decisions are made, the group may embark on strategies to re-engage the missing members or continue into new realms in search of new allies and new sources of energy. Decisions about moving into the quantum-based future finally result down to yes-no choices, this candidate or the other. And each group will follow the resolve of the majority of its members. Saying no to the impending options expresses passionate reluctance to impending change, foretells anxiety about the anticipated outcomes and ambiguity about the expected results. Those who say no to the proposed endeavors provide a much needed caution to the group's optimism and can enliven the group with details of their concerns and proposed alternatives. When forging into the unknown future, leaving behind the perceived stabilities and problems of the now, it behooves each group to attend to the anxieties of the reluctant ones. Those who are participating in the discussions about the group's collective future some may never become passionately committed to any available alternative or to the status quo. When the time comes to cast the die, which ultimately forges tomorrow out of the given of today, some don't know what to do and admit that they abstain from voting on the matter. To admit and acknowledge no opinion expresses a particular and respectable perspective. This stance allows the entire group to judge the true level of enthusiasm for the future. It serves the whole group well to heed the overall magnitude of indecision within its midst, for this disinterest and confusion will result in diminished energy for enacting the resolves. Finally, the future is formed by those in the present proposing a standing point in the midst of the not yet, and then garnering up sufficient energy to move the entire group into the wild unknown. After workshops, dialogues, conversations, and negotiation, a proposal or two, a candidate arises. Those who share the vision of the proposed directions express a committed yes. The proposal's supporters bear the ultimate responsibility for executing the relevant plans to ensure that the envisioned possibility becomes a manifested reality on the stage of history. All members of the group share a common responsibility, no matter how they voted, to work together to ensure the long-term stability of the organization. Every entity, individual, and organization gets from the now to the then in the same way, by making decisions about the kind of future into which they want to go and then going there. Moments of decision arise, whether without warning or through well-advised channels, and an inescapable question must either be affirmed or rejected. Some ignore the decision at hand, others say no, some express no opinion, others say yes. The sum total of these expressions determines the amount of energy being committed. The course of tomorrow is always determined by the energy from everyone involved in the present being committed to transforming today into a particular tomorrow. That's my long opinion about voting. And here's the short, what happens when you get into that position? Sometimes a person discovers the Isle of Blessedness in the voyage through the Sea of Tranquility. This discovery brings a sense of meaning and order to the interior landscape of consciousness. Irrational at first, this dawning turns into a wild freedom to see all there is to see, to know all there is to know. This radical eureka at the foundation of consciousness, where finally you say to yourself, my God, it makes all the sense in the world. So this sermon is my attempt to, as I said in the readings, to set a big context and try to look beneath the internal dynamics that are going on in each of us and as a country as a whole as we go between now and November the 3rd. as you know, this series of sermons has been happening on the first Sunday of every month. And I've asked the worship committee to set the November sermon for the second Sunday. So it will be after the election. But it's important for people like you and I to be able to reflect on what's going on without making a statement about the details. So that's what I'm trying to do. I want to start with a bit of a story. Well, it's a joke. It's supposed to be a joke. So there were these three engineers. They were sitting around the bar one night after work, and they were reflecting back on their lives as engineers, and they were trying to think of what was the greatest discovery of the 20th century. And the one guy said, you know, I think the greatest discovery of the 20th century was the airplane. And the other guy said, why did you say that, Joe? He said, look, it's amazing that you can put 500 people in this big metal tube with things sticking out from the side, and 18 hours later, they all show up in Mumbai. That's amazing. And the other guy said, I think it was the computer. And they said, Frank, why did you say that? He said, well, it's amazing that you can put this little box on your desk, you type a few things, and in a few minutes, the budget for next year all comes out calculated. And it's just amazing. Well, they looked at the third guy and they said, Hank, what do you think? He said, I think it's the thermos. They looked like the thermos. Why would you say the thermos? And he said, well, you know, some days on a cold winter's day, you put hot soup in it, you take it with your lunch, you get there and it's time for lunch, and my goodness, your soup is nice and warm. And other days, in the summer, you put iced tea in it, and comes lunchtime and your tea is still nice and cool and chilled. And they say, what's so amazing about that? He said, how does it tell the difference? So this sermon is a little bit about telling the difference. I want to talk about first of all, I want to talk about the perplexity of information overload and trying to sort through what is what in the 21st century. Then I want to talk about the practice of standing in the future and actively shaping the not yet. And then I want to try to ask myself and allow each of us to reflect on what happens interiorly when you decide to be a person who is actively shaping the future. And then finally, I want to talk about how a person who's actively shaping the future comes back and actually does something today. That's my agenda for this talk. It's based on the part of the conversation I had the last time about the now, and then there's the now, but in the now, there's also tomorrow that I'm aware of, and yesterday that I remember, are all part of today. Now, as some of you know, on Wednesdays, there's a little small group of us that meet for informal conversation. And this last week, Rod and I were reflecting on having been a part of doing computer programs on 80-column punch cards. I don't know if you ever tried that 80-column punch card, but if you made one mistake, you got one card out of order. Rod was telling about he put one in one time, and when he put his cards in, then the printer was just, paper was coming out. And anyway, he and I both laughed. We thought that was funny. Anyway, I'm not going to go to why. He explained why. But 80-column punch cards, nobody uses 80-column punch cards anymore. Now we all have Zoom. And not everybody has Zoom, but it's amazing who has Zoom. I sat in on a call yesterday. There was a guy from Ghana, a guy from Taiwan, and me and a bunch of others. And it was just like this little Zoom call here. Well, not all of us are in Greensboro, but the world is so connected now. Even my Indian village friends have their cell phones with WhatsApp, and I periodically get a message from them. So now, this is a big change. This is a cataclysmic change in the world in the 21st century in the availability and the overwhelming ability to disseminate information. And this raises two big problems. One is trying to figure out what's true and what's false. Because, I mean, my computer's not that sophisticated. And I'm not that good at it, but I can Photoshop. I can take a picture and make things disappear right out of the picture. And then I send this picture out, and you think that there were just two of us at this function, but actually there were three, but you can't see the third person because I just Photoshopped them out. Now, you might be able to analyze and deconstruct and figure out. So how do you verify? And what this means is that every one of us, every time you see anything, you have to ask, is it true or false? And this pushes the decision back on you. Now you can call up Steve Layson and say, hey, Steve, what do you think about this? What do you think? You can ask, but finally, you're going to have to decide. And the second thing that happens with this just overwhelming abundance of data coming in on us is how do I make sense out of all of it? What's relevant? Is it the loudest voice that's relevant, or the last piece of information? And whatever issue you take, the question is, how do I make sense out of all the data? And do I need a complete technical analysis of everything? Or I don't understand even the background of it. So the double problem today is how do I know what's true and how do I make sense out of all the data that's coming in on us? Now, this has always been the human condition. Well, it's actually the condition of every particle within the universe. Because every person, every particle, every plant, every animal is always in the situation of having to observe what's around it, judge, make a decision about what's going on, weigh up the options, determine which way it's kind of headed. What are these options? What are those options? Make some kind of decision. And that decision may be do nothing or jump high or whatever, which means act. So every point, every moment of everybody's life is a process of observe, judge, weigh up, decide, and act. And as soon as you act, you're in a new situation. And even if you don't act, the situation will change around you. This is the perpetual human condition. But what's changed between the 21st century and the, say, 16th century is the pace at which this happens. I'm reading a book. I read weird books. I'm reading a book about the history of logarithms But some guy back in 1632 spent his whole life manually calculating the table of logarithms. I can't imagine what it was like. He goes down to see his wife. What did you do today, honey? Well, I did 27 subtraction problems. Oh, wow, that's good. Well, his sitting there calculating logarithms affected 300 years of history. We don't do that anymore, and it happens very quickly. So, the current reality that all of us live in is that in the United States, we are 30 days, 29 days, I guess, from November the 3rd, which is the last day that you can vote. Each person has to make a decision for this or for that. And I just want to encourage you, it's a long ballot, vote all the way down the ballot, including the bond resolution at the bottom. And you're going to say, I don't know. And you have all of these conflicting things going on at every one, and it's facing all of us collectively. Now, I said I want to talk about two different standing points. I've come to realize that the universe, the world looks different. Whether on which side of tomorrow you stand. On which side of tomorrow you stand. Now, in football, there's, sometimes there's the defense and the offense. And sometimes my team is playing defense, sometimes my team is playing offense. I need to have a good offense and I need to have a good defense. But they're different. They're both good. There's not a value judgment about it's better to be offense or defense, but they're different. So I want to look at the two different ways it feels to stand relative to living in the day before tomorrow and living in the day after tomorrow. This is a little complicated, but I'm going to try to get through it. There's two places to live. You can live in the day after tomorrow or the day before tomorrow. Yeah. In the day after tomorrow, that what you find is that you are out creating a new framework that does not exist in the present. You're out, as it were, over nothing. In the day after tomorrow, which is, the day after tomorrow and the day before tomorrow, that's like today and yesterday. Then there are ways to exist that have been tried and true, and your object is to try to make those work. So there's two different ways to look at things. Am I going to try to patch up the present or invent a new future? And those are different, and depending on where you've decided to stand, depends on how you look at things and who you want as your friends. If you've decided to live in the day after tomorrow, if you've decided to live in the day before tomorrow, in the future, creating that which is not yet, then uncertainty becomes your friend because you never know what will exactly work. You have to try to figure things out because you don't know. And what you find out there in the future, building tomorrow, is you run into other people who, like you, are building tomorrow, and they become your colleagues in uncertainty. And all kinds of creativity happens. And the third thing that happens on that side of tomorrow is that failure becomes your teacher, because a lot of things don't work. And then you become an expert on what doesn't work. And you bring that wisdom back to the present and inform others. It looks quite different when you're living on this side, on the present side of tomorrow, because there are a lot of manuals of how to live. There is a lot of advice, and sometimes it's just a matter of patching it up a wee bit. There are teachers and leaders, and there are people you can follow, and you can pick one and you can get on their team and you can follow their advice. And on the backside of tomorrow, the object is to avoid mistakes, to kind of fit in. But on the other side of tomorrow, you find yourself creating a future which is not yet. Now, an amazing kind of thing happens interiorly when you decide to live on the other side of tomorrow. There happens a kind of illuminating light sometimes comes. And sometimes you say to yourself, out there on the other side of tomorrow, I have found a key to a big lock. For the last 10 years, I want to ground this in a particular so that I'm not just off here. For the last 10 years, a group of us have been trying to figure out how to recycle styrofoam. Styrofoam is difficult to recycle. The city won't take it, all kinds of things. We've been working 10 years to figure out how to recycle styrofoam. And last Saturday, I realized we were very close. So I stepped from last Saturday to 4 o'clock Friday afternoon and asked myself, what does the event to sign a memorandum of understanding of $44,000 of how to recycle styrofoam, what does that look like? And then I wrote backwards on Thursday, on Wednesday, on Tuesday, on Monday, and I built a pathway from last Monday to Friday to get a group of people together, socially distanced, outside, pass money, sign things. And then there was a pathway to follow. And the rest of the group was able to follow into that part of the future. There sometimes happens out in the future an amazing kind of clarity when you see what needs to happen and you understand that this, in fact, is a true statement that you can stand on. And that understanding is unbelievably empowering. Now, not everybody can, has, should, or wants to walk into the unknown and grab a hold of the future and build a pathway for the rest to follow. But that's an option, and it's really exciting. And what I want to say is, it's really exciting. Now, if you ever decide to do that, if you ever step into the future and begin to open the doors for the rest to follow, you cannot stay out there. If you ever get this brilliant illumination about the wholeness of reality, you cannot just sit there and hold on to that. There is the imperative to return to the present. Because the present, the now, October the, whatever this is, the 4th, is all that really is. So you can't stay out there. But what do you do? The task, and many of us are people, many of the people that are on this Zoom call are people who, one way or the other, have stepped into the unknown and are willing to beckon others to a future which has not yet come. And when you do that, then you have to create a new set of language. Yeah, we have to help all the rest of the present move into the future that we have seen. That's not trivial. It's very scary. And to beat people over the head for, anyway, not go there very far. And your life, when you stand out there, your life becomes an open testament for everybody to see. And you live out there by both example and by transfer of wisdom and perspective. So, where are we? We, as individuals, as a society, and as a congregation, are at one of those points in history where the future has not yet manifested itself. And we are all part of helping shape the future which is yet to come. And every one of us, whether we like it or not, has an opportunity to take a stand, to do something, and to help tomorrow unfold. And I invite each of you to participate fully in that process.